Oh my gosh, we really are here for the holidays, right? Christmas trees all around us in the studio. You are watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-host Emily Compagno. Also joining us, Carly Shimkus, Mercedes Schlapp, and Todd Pyro. We begin with what appears to be a second coming of Defund the Police. Oh. A Democrat senator appears to be renewing the controversial movement. Maybe he'll try to redefine it. You know, they love that. Even after the president dismissed it heading into the midterm elections, and as a crime crisis continues to rage in major American cities.
When it comes to public safety in this nation, the answer is not defund the police, it's fund the police.
Fund with 3 Ds. But now Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut is questioning whether law enforcement should be funded with 5 Ds in states that refuse to enforce federal gun laws, the so-called Second Amendment sanctuary states.
The county in which this shooting happened is a so-called Second Amendment sanctuary state. They have decided that they are going to essentially refuse to implement laws that are on the books. I think we have to have a conversation about whether we can continue to fund law enforcement in states where they are refusing to implement these gun laws.
So, is this faux real or just faux?
I like that. Harris, I like it. I like it.
I love it. Unfortunately, I don't love this, though, because it appears to be that second coming of Defund the Police. And, you know, as a fellow American citizen of those who are trapped in those Democrat-led cities, I feel for those citizens who can't protect themselves, who are viewed as the bad guy when there are criminals, recidivists on the streets who are flaunting and taunting those gun laws. Now, we know that 7 out of 10 Americans are arming themselves because of another person. We know that concealed carry permits and carries have risen almost triple digits in certain cities. And the irony is, as these publishers of this study come out and say, well, these licenses have increased and the state regulations are going to impact these numbers, right, with a smaller proportion of handgun owners carrying in states that have stricter regulations, they are ignoring that the gun crimes are spiking regardless of the restrictive gun measures in place. So a city like Chicago, for example, with restrictive gun in the state laws and also in the city ordinances, they have horribly detrimental gun crime there. They have violent crimes that are spiking there. What about Bambi Larson when he talks about the Second Amendment sanctuary cities? Well, what about actual sanctuary cities where Bambi Larson, rest in peace, was brutally murdered by someone because of the sanctuary city? So there's not enough time in this hour to cite the examples, but the unfortunate thing is, once again, vilifying law enforcement, vilifying law-abiding, gun-toting American citizens, and failing to see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, and as you started with putting pressure on those very neighborhoods that need protection most. Yes. It is kind of confounding to look at Chicago as such an excellent example. If Black lives matter, all lives matter, why don't those lives matter? Where are the people in the street saying, let's fix Chicago? Right. Well, heck, where's Obama? He's from there, former president. Carly.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And on the Chris Murphy front, to me, it seemed like a soundbite moment, you know, something that he said to get attention, get high fives from the base.
Senator Murphy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not a serious policy proposal, but at what cost? Because Democrats just spent the last election cycle trying to distance themselves from the Defund the Police movement. 3 weeks after the midterm elections, he's pinning them to the idea once again. And unfortunately, regrettably, and surprisingly, these soft on crime ideas aren't going anywhere. In New York City, there's a bill that's gaining traction that would bar landlords from conducting criminal background checks on tenants. So who does that affect the most? That affects the low-income folks that all of these Democrat politicians say that they're trying to protect. Over the weekend, we learned that DA Alvin Bragg in New York City has downgraded 52% of felony cases to misdemeanors. So that means that half of people who possibly committed a felony are getting a slap on the wrist, and half of victims are getting victimized once again because justice isn't served. The last thing that I'll say, the National Retail Survey says that shoplifting has costed business owners $100 billion in profits. I mean, on top of inflation and the supply chain, that is why small businesses are shutting down right now.
Yeah, they're not going to be punished.
Yep.
Carly, you and I both know how much video, because I see it on your show early in the morning. I mean, criminals have been working all night long, and then they end up on the front page of your show.
Yes.
Yeah, because their faces are all over the place. You talk about it not going away, though, and I think about that George Soros cash that has poured in, and how many people have been damaged, hurt, particularly in those neighborhoods where they need the most protection. Of course, the soft on crime is not going to go away, those liberal DAs.
Good
he
point.
poured a ton of cash through his entities in there.
Soros, Bloomberg. I mean, there's such a large number of these leftist groups that focus on gun control. At the end of the day, this is about infringement on law-abiding citizens. This is about using Defund the Police as another one of their vehicles to basically say, we need more gun laws, and that's going to solve the problem. Look, we have a reality here. It's not just about the violence, which of course has spiked in so many of these cities. There are mental health issues that need to be addressed. Even some of these gun laws, you look at the Colorado shooter, for example, that it was so tragic what happened. And what happened was that you had these red flag laws that even when they were in effect didn't work and didn't identify the shooter. So they are flawed laws. And at the end of the day, when you look at the fact that law enforcement, they need to be supported. At the end, and these minority communities are being impacted the most when you do not have police on the streets, when you don't have community policing, when you don't have these relationships between local communities and the law enforcement. That is what is the tragedy here. And that's what the Democrats fail to understand in protecting our citizens.
Do you think they don't understand?
They really don't. They believe that more gun control is the answer. They believe that our law enforcement is the problem. And they're failing to understand that it is the innocent family, these vulnerable families in these, especially in these minority communities, that are getting hit the hardest. And I got to tell you, suburbia, America, they have had it. They want to see safe streets. That's a priority.
Of course. You're very gracious to say they don't understand, because there are politics at play here. And since they were flexing this whole idea of distancing themselves right before the midterm elections from defund the police, they saw the president do it, everybody's going to do the back away here. Were they lying when they were saying that they wanted to defund the police, or are they lying now saying that they didn't want to defund the police? I don't know. I think politics are playing more of a role here.
I wouldn't use the word lie. I'd use the word, how close are we to an election? You know, like, because January 2023 is right around the corner. We're going to start going woke again. You know, we're going to start doing the policies. Police are bad. And then as we get closer and closer to November of 2024, all of a sudden, the woke policies are going to be quietly dismissed, and we're going to go back to funding the police. To your point, it's a lie. A point blank, it's a lie. But I think it's part of a bigger issue that we face in our country. The Democrats want two different Americas. They want the America, one with them at the top, if you will, with their policies and only their stuff. And the rest of us have to fly by the seat of our pants and figure it out in crime-ridden cities, in crime-ridden states. And to Carly's point on Chris Murphy, my senator, by the way, you can tell that he is unserious about this when he says, well, I really think we need to have a conversation. That's a definite Chris Murphy tell. And going to just the law, I mean, let's look at the Second Amendment. They don't enforce federal law. Well, there's a big federal law in the books. It's in the Constitution. It's called the Second Amendment. And I think we're all enforcing it. So to Chris Murphy, obviously he's making this point, like Carly said, for a soundbite. He's unserious about this. He's going to get some play in the media, and everybody's going to say, oh, Chris Murphy, you're tough on guns. And then he gets to brandish his tough on guns moniker.
Yeah, and also, Harris, really quickly, an estimated 6 million Americans carried a loaded handgun with them in 2019, double that from 2015. Why? Number one reason is because of self-defense.
That's what Emily said. I love the way you put it, Emily. You said because of another person, because many of those cases are domestic. And those are typically, as you know, the most dangerous situations that our law enforcement face. They're very unpredictable to walk into those domestic situations.
Absolutely right.
All right.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.